Hello and welcome to this latest episode of the Betting Clever series, a chance to talk about some of the key discussion points surrounding the world of profitable betting with some of its main protagonists. I am delighted to be joined today by somebody who has been there, seen it all and bought a t-shirt when it comes to betting. Steve Lewis Hamilton, welcome back, Steve.
Thank you, Pete. Good to be here.
It's good to have you back on because you're very much a long-term winner. But today, our focus of what we're going to talk about is going to be on the opposite of winning, losing. Handling how to lose, and by extension, like some of the mental health challenges, if you will, that aspiring profitable bettors and existing profitable bettors do face when they're betting. So prior to recording, we spoke about a few of the topics we are going to explore today. And, it's an overlooked topic, but for me, one that is very critical to long-term success. Now, those people watching and listening to this will be doing it through the perspective of betting to make a profit. And I dare say the handling of winning is pretty easy, especially in comparison to the stresses of losing. So we're going to explore this and touch on those topics and how to cope. So let's kick things off, Steve. Talk to me about how important handling losing has been for you from your perspective over the years. And no doubt there's probably some added pressure running a tipping service as you do.
Yeah, what you just said is exactly right. Winning's really easy, isn't it?
It is.
We can all do that. But it is those losing periods which... The bottom line is, Pete, if you're going to bet, the one guaranteed thing you're going to do is back losers. Mm-hmm. So we're all of us, if you're doing it in whatever level, you're going to go through those periods. So, I've gone through them quite a bit over the years. I've had my moments. And I think that the crucial thing that you do when you set up or when you start off is try to quantify exactly what you're looking to get from your betting. And I think that's so crucial. So are you in it for investment? Are you in it purely for enjoyment to enable you to watch the match, the racing, whatever it is, and it gives you a bit more excitement? If that's the case, then you can put a figure, I suppose, on what you're willing to spend on it, and that would be it. I think if you're looking to earn, then you have to be really pragmatic on how you're going to go about doing it. Are you going to rely on your own abilities to find bets, to work out what constitutes value, whatever sport it is? And you need to put all those things in place. So, as well as winning, when you have those losing runs, you've got something to fall back on. And it's, are you doing something incorrect? Is somebody that you following doing something that's incorrect? Is it just one of those periods, which we all have, where things are just not going your way? And again, because I knew we were talking about this, over the past few weeks, I've been banding things backwards and forwards. And really, for every answer that I've got another question for it. I think it's a subject that you can go very deep into. And I think the main cause or main reason for that is that we're all different. So if there's, I don't know, however many people are listening to this and they're serious about their betting, but as individuals, as characters, as personalities, we're all different. So what may help me to go get over those losing runs may not work for somebody else. And so I think there's certain practical foundations that you need to put in place before you kick off, i.e. you need to have a betting bank. You need to have money that's over and above what you need to survive each year. I think that's crucial. Otherwise, you put so much pressure on yourself. And I know I've been in situations over the year where that bank is diminished and I've had to go and start again. Thankfully, I've had people that have helped me. And it's simply that they've helped me because they've had trust in me and I've had trust in myself to want. And I've known that I've had so much faith in my own ability that I knew I would get out of it.
Yeah.
But if you've not got that faith or that trust, then it does become a very difficult and sometimes an impossible place to be. So I think, as I say, the practicalities of your bank, absolutely keep records that are absolutely accurate You don't miss anything on those records. So that you can look back. When you're winning, it's great looking back. Oh, I've backed this, I've backed this, I've backed that. So you need to go back and find out why in my case, why those horses got beat. Why did you bet them? And I think you need to ask yourself as many questions about the winners that you back as about the losers that you back as well, because sometimes you can be dead lucky and have bets that won that you shouldn't really have had.
Yeah.
And all those things, they all combine to, I suppose, try to deal with the situations when they present themselves, whether it is winning or losing.
Yeah, you remember the winners that you didn't back, don't you? And maybe you don't remember quite so easily the losers that you didn't back, the ones that you missed out.
Yeah, that's a human trait, but you've got to be as dispassionate, as objective as you can. And that's why keeping records of each bet is fundamentally important so that you can see what you've done. And as I say, I think you have to have a baseline of what does constitute a bet. Now, for me, what constitutes a bet is purely value aspect. No matter how much you fancy something or the eventuality happening, you have to put a percentage on it. You have to put a price on it. And that's the bottom line. If it doesn't match that price, then it becomes a no bet. Now, what can happen is because you fancy something so strongly, maybe you get tempted to have a bet that maybe is not the price that you think it should be. Simply, and you think, well, maybe I was wrong there. Maybe instead of it being a 9-4 shot, maybe it should be a 2-1 shot, and maybe I should still back it. I've learned over the years I don't do that. My research is so thorough, and I believe so much in my own prices that therefore I won't adjust unless something happens. For me, again, it's a race. Maybe the first or second favourite boils over in the paddock, or you see something that physically you think, I can knock a percentage point or two off of that one, and maybe that would enhance the chance of my one. So that there's always those eventualities. And as I say, the pricing is very subjective, but you have to have a bottom line on when you're going to bet, and that's the only way that you can judge whether you're doing things correctly or not.
Mm-hmm. So many of the people watching this will be using tipster services, whether it's yours or any of the ones that we kind of advocate and recommend at the Smart Betting Club. And one of the key things that we advocate as well is record keeping, and it's for good reason, as you mentioned there, because I speak from personal experience as someone. I've had about a month ago I had a really tough run, and just variance and narrow defeats here and there, and a couple of queries over some strategies I was following. And then I looked at my database for those strategies and the historical records. I had thousands of data points, and it just gave me the confidence to go, well, this is just what happens. And the edge is still there. I still feel confident in what I'm using and how I'm getting on, and everything I'm doing contributing to it. But I just can't control the narrow margins of success and failure sometimes. So that's whether it be how a jockey runs a race or a golfer finishes a putt, how a penalty hits the crossbar and goes in or out.
It's absolutely true. And then again, that point you're making, this is where I had an argument with myself one way or the other, is that if you're a punter, a gambler that's following somebody, but you have no interest really in that particular sport that they're advising bets in other than earning money, then maybe you don't look at that event. So if you're talking about golfing, or if I'm talking about horse racing, now I could have 10 bets. Out of those 10, maybe 8 of them were going to win, but 4 of them fell at the last. The jockey fell off a couple of others. 2 got beat a short head. Now, if you're not watching that and all you can see are 10 losers, then it's rubbish. If you look at it and you think, well, have another 10 goes at that, the likelihood is 6 or 7 of them can go and win. And it's the same as you're saying with golf. The putt that lips out, which wasn't expected to happen, somebody that has your players in front and somebody goes birdie, birdie, eagle, eagle to beat you on the last, doesn't happen that often, but it can happen. And if it happens 1 or 2 times, 3 or 4 times, and the punter that's following your service, whatever it may be, is not aware of that, all he can see or she can see is loss on their account, then they can become hypercritical of that, which I can understand. And another way, the counter argument to that is if somebody's just in it for the financial gain, maybe watching it is too much of a stress for them. Just watching that the horse just gets touched off, that player doesn't win, the tennis match doesn't go quite right, she or her serves a double fault when they had match point. All those things, if you're watching, maybe lots of people can't deal with that stress.
I can't, Steve, I don't like watching it. I know Americans call it having a sweat on the game. The sweat in an outcome, the sweat in a football game or whatever, the sweat in the particular over-unders line. And that goes to like Sky Bet, they used to have it matters more when there's money on it. Those kind of theories, that bookmakers want to promote. They want to promote you from kind of getting excited and engaged with it. But I don't know about you, Steve, I find the reality is I am much better in terms of handling the vagaries of betting by not watching something that I'm invested more financially. It's much better for me to watch after the event when I know the result. Even experienced as I am at doing this, not as experienced as you, but certainly experienced in terms of handling, placing bets, etc., and handling it. Even I just get caught up in the emotion of it, of an event, of something I can't control.
Right.
I'm not in the middle of it.
I think I'm probably the opposite because the racing that I watch all has a knock-on effect as what I may do the following day, the following week, the following month. So every race to me becomes very relevant for the future.
Mm.
And so if I had to rely simply on a form book telling me, then I would only be in the same position as what anybody else can do. Yeah. My edge, I always feel, is that basically I watch every National Hunt race that has run. If not live, then I watch the recording. And running my own ratings alongside that, having my own comments alongside each race, which I do, for me gives me that edge. And really getting back to how you deal with the losing situation is that because I feel that I'm so thorough in what I do, that I think, well, over a period of time, obviously I accept that there will be losing periods. And the other thing that you have for me, and it's happened fairly recently, is that the amount of work that I put in, there's a lack of opportunity.
Yeah.
What happens when you do all that work, all that research, and then the prices are the same as yours? What do you do? And then you're thinking, I'm putting in a hell of a lot of hours here for no reason, nothing's coming back.
Yeah.
But again, I'll turn that on its head and say, yeah, but you don't want to be back in. That research is telling me not to have a bet, and it's a matter then of keeping patient and waiting for those opportunities. So that's why I'm thinking people that are losing, that are enduring that losing sequence, that losing run, we put it down to being, we're out of form. Quantify that. What does that mean? Does that mean that you're rubbish at what you're actually trying to do, whether it's pick the winner of a football match, tennis match, golf, horse racing? Are you rubbish at doing that? Or is it basically you're just going through a little bit of a hard period, but things are just not running for you, which happens, unfortunately. As you said, it's like the finite margins of winning and losing. And so therefore you need to have complete faith in what you're doing. So whether it's your own selections, whether you're following somebody else. And that's the other thing, if you're running something, I'm running something, nobody knows me personally, or very few know me personally. So they're only trusting you on the records you're putting out, the blurb that you put on your websites, but they don't really know you. Whereas I do know that people that do know me know the amount of work I put in. And if I say things are not going so well at the moment, they show a little bit of sympathy for that instead of just saying, well, you're rubbish. So there's such a vagary of different people, different aspects. And obviously what we're trying to do is try to advise, well, how do you deal when things do go wrong?
Yeah, so my thought is that people need to look a little bit more at what they can lose rather than what they can just win. And, that for me is a major point because, you're always attracted, this product has made X amount of points or X amount of ROI. And people are kind of, great. And they tally up and go, well, if I put £10 a point, I would make $3,000 or whatever. And they don't necessarily look at well, if you started at exactly the worst time, even at £10 a point, you could be a grand down within 2 or 3 months just because that's the way the vagaries of form and variance have kicked in. So I find one of the key elements in how people can succeed is that they understand and appreciate what they're about to engage in, what they're, if they start and, you go on a bad run, they really appreciate that. It's just bad luck, bad timing. There's no way without the power of hindsight to kind of to know that run's due, versus the people that say, oh, well, that's typical. I join a service and it starts to lose. And then they could try and find a service that isn't winning. And just to give you an example on this, actually, because there's a golf service I help oversee, and it's very good this year. It's about 35% ROI. But then the last couple of months, it struggled to pick a winner. A bunch of seconds and thirds. It's golf, of course, this happens. And then the last 2 weeks, we've had winner. So Rory, McIlroy, and then Sanjay the week before. Now, during the period, like the 8-week period when there's no winners, we had a bunch of people leave. And then obviously we miss out on those two winners subsequently. But then if you look at the strike rate for the service, the winners are actually about 2%, because it's golf and you're backing at big odds. About 2% are actually going to win. That's 1 in 50. So really it's about 1 every 5 weeks. So 2 in 10 weeks is about right. But it just, the way it falls, it's like none in 8 and then 2 in 2. And those people that understand that kind of look at the strike rate and understand the way it's going to fall and the patterns of this service, they're the ones that succeed and kind of stick with it through those fallow times. And I feel like those people are the ones that are best served by these kind of services and kind of going to make the most of it. Do you find the same, having run your service for such a long time? That's the type of client that thrives?
Yeah, with gambling, it's been exactly the same, really, Pete, if I'm honest with you. I've got a lot of long-term members that have stayed, which I'm ever so grateful for, But I think that's the thing, is that they have an understanding of what you're trying to do. And I think anybody that's getting into it for the first time, getting back to my point earlier, is what are you trying to achieve? What are you in it for? Mm-hmm. And therefore, you have to do that bit of research and you have to lay that platform down. Because one thing that I will absolutely guarantee is that the shorter term you look at it, the more irrelevant it becomes.
Yeah.
And the more skewed the results will be. Literally anybody can have a great 2-3 days, great 2 or 3 weeks. But you're in it for the long haul. If you intend to be in it for the long haul, you are. And as we know, as punters, you're generally in it for a lifetime if you're any good.
Yeah.
Even if you're losing bits, but if you can afford to lose the bits that you're doing, for whatever reason, people get hooked on playing any sport or a hobby. Well, people get hooked on the punting as well, because it does give you that involvement, and it gives you that involvement, particularly if you enjoy a sport. I only got punting with horse racing because I loved horse racing. I loved horses as a kid. And it was that way round. It wasn't gambling, or what am I going to gamble on now? It became horse racing. How am I going to get involved in it? So for anybody that's going to become involved in it, you have to ask your questions why, and then you have to ask, well, whereabouts, what foundations do you lay so it can become long-term, mm-hmm. that you have a control over it. And so therefore, whether it's following a service, if you're doing it by yourself, I don't know how anybody with horse racing, again, I can only talk from the way I work, but I know the amount of hours I have to put in. Mm-hmm. So if you're betting on horse racing, you need to have either some type of system, some type of method, some person maybe that you follow, because actually putting in all that form work yourself, I think you'll need to have a lot of time on your hands. If you're doing a full-time job, I can't see where you're going to get the time to study form, unless you're really, really specific and specialise in a particular type. Maybe if you just do 2-year-olds, maybe, mm-hmm. or just novice hurdlers, whatever it may be, you'd have to be so disciplined how you'd go about it. But however you go about it, I can guarantee that you will have a losing run. You will back losers. And so it's just, how do you deal with that situation when that happens? And what mentality have you got? As we said earlier, if you're wanting to watch it, for me, I would much rather watch it. For you, you'd much rather not.
Yeah.
So it's how do you go and do you have faith in the method, the person that you're following, or if you're doing it yourself in the system that you're following? Because if that breaks down, then the next question is, who do I turn to? Where do I go?
Mm.
And going back to the point you're making about people with services, if they're going flitting from one to the other and they're only giving it a month or two, then pretty much what happens, they'll wind up joining every service they join, probably on the losing run, and it'll go from bad to worse.
Yeah.
Basically, it's just you need to have confidence, certainly confidence in faith in who you're going with. And as I say, if you just do it purely on a results base, I can see the logic of doing that because you're looking to earn. But also, maybe if you do it on results based only, you don't recognize maybe the misfortune that's gone on to present that losing run. And maybe, therefore, you'd have a bit more confidence in thinking, well, that's going to level out over a period of time. As I said earlier, that those two fallers, when they were clear at the final fence, maybe they won't fall over the next 2, 3, races that you're betting in. So you need to have that confidence and that faith, however you do it.
Yeah, and I think the key thing I take away from speaking to people like yourself and my own experience is that I'm going to lose more than I'm going to win. Especially of a kind of the approach I take, which is trying to make a little bit more some higher ROI type products and services and strategies that I follow. And it all ties in with,
That means you're going to have more losing bets than winning bets, not you're going to lose more.
Oh, yeah, sorry, that's what I mean. I have more. So to explain a little bit more, I looked at my portfolio for one of the strategies I followed over the last year. Of the 52 weeks, I had what I call mega weeks, only 3 mega weeks. So, that's like 5.76% of the time. Now, as well as that, I also had 15 what I put very good weeks. And those combined made significantly more than the majority, which was kind of break even, slight losses. But then there was what I put 8 bad weeks within that. So ultimately, I had just over a third of the time, or each week, I was making a profit. Now, like only 3 of those weeks were actually superb profits. So it just shows you the patience. This is my strategy. It's a little bit more risky on one of the things I follow. But it just goes to show the kind of patience that I needed. And sometimes you do need when you're doing a certain strategy. And people might take a slightly less risky approach than I have. But it suits me, my risk profile for this particular product and service. But I'm comfortable with that. But also I have that data. So like I say, when I had a tough run, I had a really bad week. It's probably about a month ago. And it was narrow margins. And I looked at it and went, well, I actually saw this was my worst week since December 2020. So it's 10 months. And I thought to myself, I will take that every 10 months. If I'm sitting here in August 2022 and that's my next really bad week, well, that's fine by me. But that's for me is the reality. And I was listening to another podcast and there's a very successful American, I think he bets on golf as well, called Rufus Peabody. And he had the same kind of deal. He said atrocious run of luck, if you like, playoff loser after playoff loser. And this is the guy he's made so much, I believe, made so much from his betting. He doesn't even have to, he could just retire tomorrow. But obviously he enjoys what he does. And he is one of the best bettors out there. But yet he is still as vulnerable to losing and also dealing with the consequences of losing and how to handle it and the mindset required as the rest of us is just on a much higher scale. So,
but the scale, in effect, doesn't matter. It will have whether you're betting in thousands or in tenors, the effect that it has on that particular individual will be the same.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why, again, it's personalities. It's down to each person. What are you happy with? If you're happy betting in tenors and that's all you're going to bet in, then fine. You have to accept that that's the case. If you're happy betting in £1,000 units and you're happy doing that and you can afford to do that, great. Because obviously it looks like you're going to earn more betting to that amount than the tenors. But your mind, you have to have the mind to be able to do it. You have to have the character to be able to identify why you're winning, why you're losing, and therefore be able to carry on. As I said earlier, you are in it for the long haul, basically. If you're thinking, I'm going to do this for 6 months, try and earn myself 2 holidays, or I want to buy a new car, or it doesn't work. It just doesn't work.
It doesn't work like that, no.
No, it is that long strategy. And obviously, I think, if I'm honest, there's very few people that are willing to put themselves through it, because nothing's guaranteed. We are, after all, what we're doing is gambling.
Mm-hmm.
But I always, going back in the day when I used to be on track, I always go back to what I used to try and do is get a bookmaker mentality. Now, the bookmakers would turn up. They had their pitches, and they would be, you knew what meetings they'd be at. And basically, they would have 5 or 6 days a week. And they would have atrocious losing runs.
Mm-hmm.
You'd go and be 4 or 5 favourites out of 6 or 7 races that have gone in. And you could see which ones had done their money. And that could happen for a period of time. But they knew, they were convinced, because it would, at that time, the joints were passed down family to family. They knew that eventually they would win.
Yeah.
So even if they went through some really horrendous times, and I always used to bear that in mind, I think, well, if it's happening to them, and in theory they've got the figures on their side, then if I could get the figures on my side, then I've got to have that attitude as well. Mm-hmm. And as I say, I've had my moments where things didn't go quite according to plan. But as you said, there's also been times when you thought, I've played really well there. I think that's the other thing, Pete. You can look and you think, I've played really well. That was a cracking bet. And it could just be that you could have 1, 2, 3 on the spin go in, and you've had a fantastic day or week. But you could play equally as wisely, and all 3 could get beaten.
Yeah.
And really, you have to, although it's pretty much impossible to do, even for me, because I'll get annoyed with it, but you have to have the same mindset no matter how that result goes, and the only way you get that is having faith and confidence in how you're betting.
Mm-hmm.
So providing that's in place, then you've got to be able to withstand it. All I ever did to try, again, going back, all I ever did to try and level out the stress of it was to take away the peaks and troughs.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a period of time when I used to play up quite big if I was doing well, and that would give me a high peak. But then the danger that I found, this was only through experience, that when you started losing, you try to do the same.
Mm.
And then in effect, that became chasing.
Yeah.
And that, I will guarantee that trough will have far more negative effect on you than the peak will give you happiness. The losses will always hurt more than the wins will give you joy. That's another thing that happens.
It's psychologically proven that the feeling of a loss is twice the pain in terms of the joy that you get from a winning bet. So
it's like, oh, right.
Yeah, it's exactly. I think they've done tests on rats in labs, and it's been proven. I've read some psychology books that have talked about that. And then if you think about you following a service that maybe has got a 10, 15% strike rate, and then you think, well, the losses, you feel them double, twice as much, if not more, then you kind of can get a sense of like the toll it can take. And I think as well, I wanted to talk about the fact how many people, I think this is encouraged by bookmakers as well, in terms of their engagement, trying to get people to bet more and to use their services more. Too many people, they connect their self-worth and their profile and their sense of well-being and morale with whether their bets have won or lost. It impacts their personality. And that certainly is something that you have to be careful about, because if you're winning, if you had a winning week, you might feel invincible. And that might not just relate to, placing more on your bets. It's just the way you go about your business every day. And equally, when you're losing, as you're more likely to lose more often than you win, it can dampen your mood. It can dampen the way you go about your life with your family and friends. And I think it's really important to not let a bet success or failure, especially if, it's still a good bet. It just, you picked a horse that was 10-1. It ran far better than a 10-1 shot. It just didn't win. And that's a good bet, really. You picked a bet that performed better than its odds would suggest. And you can't correlate that fact it didn't win to allow it to dominate your mind and to kind of your self-worth. And I think that's a trick as well, not to, personally speaking anyway, not to let my betting impact my thought process or my behavior and my sense of self-worth.
In theory, it shouldn't. But I think the very nature of doing it will. And it's really the same. If you've had a bad day at work, you're going to come back and that, you try. I've always tried not to let it have an effect. but you can't help that it will do. And I think, anything we do in life, if you've gone out and you've had a bad day for whatever reason, that will have an adverse effect. So I think you have to be absolutely aware of it, conscious of it. And I do say I've been pretty successful. Maybe my character enables me to be like that, because I know going back when I used to get back from the races, it was always nice to have won and you can come in with a smile on your face, but the family wouldn't really know whether I've won or lost. And even watching races, when they used to watch me watching a race, they never knew whether my horse had won or lost. They had to ask, how did it get on Dad, or how did it get on Steve? And I said, oh yeah, it won. But that wasn't natural. It wasn't like, oh, that's how I'm naturally that cool and calm.
Yeah.
No way. I worked at that. And the reason I worked at it is going back to those peaks and troughs.
Yeah.
I knew if I got so excited about that one winning, then what's my reaction going to be when I get beaten a neck in a close finish?
Mm-hmm.
And with all of it, I've tried to really have that break that once the day was over, which could be a long, long day, but once you're back with the family, that you try to, it's difficult to do. And I don't think you're ever going to do it completely. It's far easier to do when you've won than when you've lost. But if you've had a bad period, then obviously it has an effect. And it's something that there's very few people that understand what you're doing. So even trying to explain it's gone bad because, and you try to explain, if somebody's not got an understanding of what you're doing, then that's going to fall on deaf ears. And basically all they're hearing is, oh, you've lost or you've won. And so having somebody that you can, and this is something that I used to have that, obviously, when we were going racing, you had like-minded people that were all trying to do the same. And I used to travel with a couple of people. And so therefore you had that conversation going or coming back of what's actually happened. And that got it off your chest.
Yeah.
But there's very few people. There's only I've got a couple of friends that I can speak to about it, and that's it, because nobody's got an understanding of it. And I wouldn't want them to have an understanding of it, and I wouldn't want to put that on them. But it's still, as people, sometimes we need to offload that something's not gone completely as you foresee that it should have gone. And so therefore it's good to get that off your chest and just to say. But all of it, you do, depending on what your character is like, what you're like as a person, you have to find your own way with this. But I think put those principles in place. And I think it's just so important to try and identify what you're actually trying to achieve. And if you can get that clear in your head, then obviously I would have thought you can make a better judgment of whether it's going the right way or it's going the wrong way, or you need to do something different. And how are you going to go about doing that? That's how I started off, is just asking myself all those questions before over a period of time I got to where I was, which was doing my own work and having confidence in doing that and knowing how much time I had to devote to it. But obviously lots of people are not in that situation.
Well, I think you were obviously an individual that is able to be honest with themselves and frank with themselves and to dispassionately look at, to work out what it is you're trying to do and to make rational decisions and then, follow them up and try and avoid the emotion of betting. But I do find that I get a lot of benefit from having people. Yeah, I've got family and people that I don't really understand betting and, win or lose. I don't really get into the intricacies of how much I've won or lost. I don't really want to live my life out. I want to be separate from that when I'm with them. But I do find it beneficial to have people who do bet, who I talk to, whether I bet with them on certain strategies or who I know are similar aligned interests or basically following some of the same things, to bounce off them and to talk to them when I'm having a tough time or to listen to them when they're having a tough time, because it all feeds into my experience to know that, well, if I'm having a tough time, well, this guy who's a lot more experienced than I am has had a tough time 2 months ago. So who am I to say that I'm going to be, I'm never going to have the same issues? Of course I am. How did he handle it? What's his mentality towards that? But further than that, I think having somebody that understands it from the point of view of being you're accountable to them. So you're obviously accountable to yourself there, Steve, and that's great. But I don't think a lot of people have that necessarily. easily easily able to develop that or have that ability. So therefore, having somebody that you trust and accountable to, who can quickly grasp what you're trying to do, and then you have to explain your decisions rationally to them. I think that certainly helps. And I've seen that help other people in betting. So you say, look, I'm going to follow this particular strategy, or I'm taking this approach, or this is what I'm doing, and then these are the decisions I'm going to make. And then as you make those decisions, if you have to back them up and explain them, then that's going to stop you, hopefully, from doing something, overstaking or chasing your losses or whatever it might be, because you're going to have to explain that. And then even before you have to explain it, you're looking at making a decision. You need to go look at the data. You need to make sure that it's based on fundamentals. It's not just an irrational feeling that you might have. You need to go and look at all of the data behind it. So I certainly have found that a real help to have people that I can have to justify what I'm doing.
Maybe it's just come to me that even if you've not got that person or the people to do that with, maybe it could be a trick to imagine that you've got to explain that to somebody.
Yeah.
So if somebody's following your golf, what you're saying, the golf bets, and they wanted to have a bet themselves, if they could go through the process of thinking, right, I've got to explain this to Pete, why I'm having this bet. If at the end they've come to, yeah, I'm really happy with that, fine. But maybe during that process, they can come back and thinking, oh yeah, well, maybe that's not quite right. I know, again, going back when I first started and then on the track, that used to be the case that you would do that because there were 3 or 4 other punters and it'd be, what do you fancy? Or this race, how's it going to pan out? And it would be, well, I think this may happen, that may happen. And maybe they'd come back and go, yeah, but how about that? And you go, oh, yeah, I didn't think of that. And so you got a more rounded picture of it. But as years have gone on, again, I'm only speaking personally, I try to get that round picture and try to work out all those eventualities. And that's why I say then the bottom line comes down to what price is that eventuality going to happen. Now, there's certain things you can either read or you can hear that may just have an effect on that. So, but again, I'm just thinking now, I've tried to build that all into prior to me watching a race. If I'm watching the racing TV, for instance, that I use, you have the presenters on there and the pundits on there giving their opinions. And all I do for myself, some of them I turn off, I confess that I don't think that they're, But then there's others that I've got respect for, that I know that they're doing what they're doing. And they can say something, I go, no, you're wrong now. Or they may, but not very often, may just put something there that maybe just gets me thinking, but to be honest, as I've got more and more experience, I've found out the vast, vast majority of the pundits on there do very little in the way of serious in-depth homework. So they're not going to tell me anything that I don't know.
No.
So
I think as well, what you're talking about there, when you used to be on track and on course, you had that social network there, you had those people. And these days it's trying to replicate that in the online betting world that we all existed. We're all sat at home in our office or wherever it may be on our mobile phone, placing bets and grinding away with our betting. And it can be quite an isolating experience. So with a network, I find, even if it's just an online network, I do find it helpful, just to bounce a WhatsApp message or Skype or Zoom or whatever it is, or an email, or even a call. Absolutely, definitely a call does help. Because when you're having a tough time, I think it really does help to get perspective from people that you trust. And they know, that you're not ringing to kind of be told anything particularly new sometimes. You're just messaging because whatever's happened is festering. And that happened to me. It's happened to me over the time I've been doing this, that even when I can sit down and go, look at the data, this is why you're doing it. You're doing it for the right reasons. It does eat away at you. It does eat away at you, even though you do it all again.
You need to get it off your chest, Pete. That's what happens, isn't it?
You need to get it off your chest. And it's just a human feeling, a thing that we need to do to kind of get it in place in your mind to be comfortable with it. And for me, it's just natural. It's talking about it. It's being honest and say, look, it doesn't make me any better or worse as a person. I would do this again. I've not been betting irrationally. I'm making sensible decisions. I just can't control probability and I can't control variance. But what I know I can control is my staking, and I can control what I bet upon and why I'm betting upon it, and the logic behind it. And I wanted to also talk about bankroll management, because for me, you've mentioned that at the top of when we started talking, and for me that's a fundamental aspect of what we do. And get your take on it would be interesting, because bankroll management, everyone talks about it, but the reality is when you put it into practice, is difficult as well. So the theory is one thing, but in practice, especially in today's era of having as many bookmaker accounts as you can for many people, and the topping up of those, I find, can be difficult. If you've got 20 betting accounts, which is quite normal to have 20 bookmaker accounts because you're trying to get on as many as possible, or spread your bets around, and you have to top up, say, 15 of them on a regular basis. And the 5 you've got winnings in, you don't want to withdraw because you don't want to get those accounts cut. It can be quite difficult. So certainly having records and having good bankroll management does help you keep a level head, especially when you have that bankroll or whatever that money is, completely aside from your bills or whatever it is you need to live off. It's like, right, I'm sticking £5,000 or £500 or whatever it might be. I'm going to use that to top up my accounts, and that's it, and then it's a sensible amount, and I will grow it from there. And if that goes down, it goes down. If it goes up, it goes up, and I will look to build it from there. But I don't know what you think, Steve. That is just having bankroll is a critical part of making it a success.
Oh, it's a principle. You need to have that. Otherwise, you can't function. It's very different now, though, Pete, because you're talking about having as many bookmaker accounts as you can. My betting is almost entirely on the exchanges.
Yeah.
Simply because I can't get bookmaker accounts. They've not lasted, or are restricted to such a heavy extent that they're worthless.
Yeah.
So therefore, and even going back, because how I used to deal with it, again, it was something that I used, and maybe people could find this helpful, I'm not sure, but I never used to think of betting. This was a conscious decision by me. Don't think of it as money. That was the other thing. But those days we were dealing in cash. So you was actually seeing it. But I always, my little thing, I used to just use it. I used to call them units. So I never had a 500 quid bet. It was always a 500 unit bet. Whatever I was winning or losing, I just transferred it over to units, because for me, it seemed a less stressful way of thinking that I'd lost 5,000 units rather than £5,000.
Yeah, it's a good trick. Yeah.
And actually thinking about it in pounds, that at the time would also mean I could have bought this with that. I could have bought this and I've lost that. And once you start doing that, the betting's gone. You can't do it. You've got to have some dispassionate way of looking at what you're betting, and not just thinking what you can buy with it or what you could have bought with what you've lost. Because again, that will put so much strain on you that it becomes an impossible thing to do. Mm-hmm. But that was then in cash. Now we're dealing basically online. You don't see any cash now. All the bets are done either on your phone or via the internet. So maybe that's not as relevant now, but it's still completely crucial that the money that you're betting with, you're not dependent on. So This is the other thing that I'm saying is, like, each individual has to understand what they're trying to achieve. Now, for me, literally my livelihood depending on my betting and running my racing service, no other income whatsoever. And I kicked off from nothing. Yeah. So there was, from the outset, I had that pressure on me. I was very fortunate, well, maybe not fortunate, it worked that early on I was successful. And so it built up very quickly. And so I got a good bank behind me, and I could start increasing what I wanted to do betting wise. But then I've had my moments when it has gone pear-shaped and things have dipped. And it's only through having, and this is what I'm saying to people that are doing it, it's only through having confidence and belief in what you're doing that you can carry on, because it would have been so easy to go, all right, that the bubbles burst, that's it, pack up, go and do something else. But maybe I had nothing else to do. I'm not qualified to do anything else. So maybe that's what, my hand was forced. But, and the only way that, if I'm honest again, the only way that I deal with these losing situations is I can't work any harder. I can't put more hours in than I do, I don't think. But is just try and be so much more methodical so that when you're looking back at the records that you keep, you can look back and you go, well, you broke them down. You won that week. You've had a fantastic week that week. You've had some fallow weeks those weeks.
Yeah.
For me, it's just looking at the bets that I've had, the type of bets that I'm having. And with the exchange as well, it's not just betting, it's laying as well. So the type of lays that I'm doing. And obviously, sometimes what can happen, I love to oppose short price favourites. By the very fact that they're short price favourites, I could lay 3, 4, 6-4 shots, and the 3 or 4 of them can win one after the other.
Yeah.
And then you think, then you've done a bit of damage. But when I look back at the type of favourites that I am laying, I know over a period that they're showing me a decent profit. And they are the right lays, because for me, those 6-4 shots should have been maybe 2-1, 9-4 shots.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's only being able to go back, look at the record, look at what you've done and see, oh yeah, they're showing me a profit. That gives you that confidence then to go back. Having somebody to talk that through with, I think mentally is a great help. If you've got somebody that you can say, I've done this, I've done this, I've done this, and they have an understanding of it, then yes, I think personally that's a great help. And if you've got somebody that's brilliant, but also the other way of looking at it's no good telling somebody that if they've got no idea of what you're talking about. If anything, that can wind you up a bit more.
Yeah, it probably encourages some bad decisions. Yeah, that's important to say. Like, it's got to be someone that you trust and who has a sensible head on their shoulders. Whether they understand betting or not, at the very least, they can understand the decisions you're making, and you have to, justify them to them. Then I think that, that it will stop you from making irrational decisions. But I just wanted to, it's been a really interesting discussion, but I wanted to wrap things up today by just talking and saying, look, you talked about the profile of people, and I've done some work at the Smart Betting Club on people's risk profile, because everybody is very different. And some of us like to take more risks, less risks. Every day when we're walking down the street, some of us want to cross the middle of the road. Some of us always cross at the zebra crossing. Some of us drive 35 and a 30. Some of us never go over 30. So we all make risk decisions in our life, all the time, and everyone is very different. And so what works for you or I won't work for somebody else. So it's just a way of finding what works for you is crucial. And, if people listening to this are, interested or concerned about their betting, then it's important to say that everybody is different and it isn't going to suit everybody. And there's no harm in taking an approach that suits you or not betting at all, because it certainly doesn't suit everybody. But if you are, then obviously thinking about things like bankroll management, thinking about, understanding losing probability, all these kind of the strike rate, all these kind of things, I find have made a big difference.
It's absolutely crucial. If you were investing in any business, if you were going, all of a sudden you were setting up a plumbing firm, an electrician firm, whatever, I would hope if you were going to be a success at it, that you would do it in detail. If you're going to open a shop, you would look at all the pros and cons about it. And betting's no different if you're looking to make a profit. Yeah. It is complicated. It's not, there's not, this is going to earn me a fortune, or that's not there. Mm-hmm. It's just simply not there. You have to go into it in depth with yourself and see what you're going to be happy with. And so it comes back to what we said earlier. It's that trust, that confidence in what you're doing. And the only way you're going to do that, you do have to ask yourself these questions. I still continue to ask myself these questions now after 30 odd years of doing it. And it's what suits. And as we've already said, some people are just not suited to betting above a limit, whether that's £10, £100, £1,000, whatever it is. That £10 bet will have the same effect on somebody, one person, as a £10,000 bet would have on somebody else.
Yeah.
The money situation doesn't increase or decrease the stress that you have or the enjoyment that you get.
Yeah.
So what you have to do as an individual is find out what suits you. What are you happy with? What exactly are you looking to get from your betting?
Yeah.
That's what you have to. And once you answer that question and you answer it honestly and truthfully, then you're on the way. At least you're taking a forward step. And then it comes down to your bankroll management, your record keeping, absolutely crucial, so that you can justify what you're doing. Mm-hmm. And And you get great enjoyment out of that as well. When you look back at the end of the year and you say, I've had that bet, it's certainly that. You've got an ROI of whatever, then there's the deal of enjoyment you can get out of it. And also, if it is tied in with the sport, then it can enhance that. If you're only doing it for the financial side, be aware that the reasons that there may be losses along the way, as you were saying with your golf, if the person that's following those bets can identify why that losing period may be there, then maybe they have a better understanding of it.
Yeah, especially if you can analyse the track record, like you say, that gives you that confidence. And just to finalise, I'd say as well that, I always advocate people who are new or people who are unsure about whether this is for them, just to do it at small stakes. There's no need to rush in and try and prove yourself to be something you're not at big stakes. If you can't handle it at £5, like you say, you're never going to handle it at 500, and that's fine. But you find out what's right for you, and if it suits you, and if the kind of, we cover tipsters here, if they suit you, you can choose the right ones. Far better to choose one or two, get started, small stakes, and see if it works for you and fits into your, not just your if you like, psychological profile, but your practical, the day-to-day implications of the work you do and how it fits in. So, lots of things to consider, but it is complex when you start to really up it and you start to, increase what you do and how much it can make you. But to start off with, you can just make it really simple and just see if it works for you in a simple manner and simple stakes. And then you can scale it up from there if you start to get the bug. And I think you're certainly someone who has had the racing bug and the betting bug for such a long time, Steve. And it's great to get all the benefits of your experience today on this. I would say like this topic that's very rarely covered. People don't like to talk about losing, but it's it's something that we all do.
Absolutely guaranteed. If you're going, as I think I said at the beginning, if you're going to have a bet, one thing's guaranteed is that you're going to back a loser. It's absolutely it's what happens. I think anybody starting off as well is that I think you need to give it a period of time. And by a period of time, I would say a year.
Yeah.
And you don't even have to be betting anything, to be honest. Just monitor.
Yeah.
But I think also any individual will quickly realise if it's not for them as well. Because all of a sudden, if you've had your tenner on whatever the bet was, and you're so fraught that you can't wait to see it, and you get your heart rate's up to such a rate that that you've got sweats coming out, then maybe initially you think, no, this is not for me. I'd much just rather watch it and enjoy it for what it is.
Yeah.
So maybe that what people do recognise that quite quickly, but for others, no. As I said, I think for lots of people, it's a lifetime of what you do. It is a lifetime thing. Once you've started and you're into it, you're there forever.
Well, yeah, exactly. It grabs you. It's a bug, and it becomes part of you, and it becomes not all encompassing, but it becomes an interest. It becomes something that you enjoy, and you trying to beat the exchange or beat the bookmaker. It becomes a passion, and it becomes something that you enjoy, as well as the financial interest that it can provide. It also brings a kind of a challenge that I like to solve anyway.
It's a challenge every day.
It is every day new challenges with betting. And even with your experience, it's about using your past experience of winning and losing and how to handle it and making sure that you are doing things in the right way and keeping on the solid footing. So Steve, thank you ever so much. Do you want to remind people of your website? So if people are interested in checking you out again?
Yeah, they can just go to slh.co.uk or Google Steve Lewis Hamilton, and I'm sure it'll come up.
It will do. Well, Steve, thank you ever so much for the benefit of your expertise today. I've enjoyed today's chat, and I'm sure the listeners have too. So
just hope it's a benefit to people. And if it gets them thinking, that's the important thing.
Yeah, and if people do have questions on this, because we'll plan follow-ups, and if people, these podcasts as well, trying to discuss some of the topics surrounding the world of betting that maybe don't get the coverage that they sometimes should do, then please do get in touch if you have questions for me and Steve based on what we talked about today as well. We welcome your comments. So thanks very much again, Steve. And thank you everybody for listening.
Thank you, Pete.